Okay, so what you saw in Mo's address position, you see these two very important lines for the single plane address. And we want to talk about why we want these things. Remember, everything relates. There's a domino effect that occurs throughout the swing motion. If we don't get the address position correct, then we won't get the backswing correct.
What is happiness? Happiness is achievement. What's the father of achievement? Motivation. What's the mother? Encouragement. The fine golf swing is truly achievement. Man may lie, cheat, and steal for gain. But he'll never gain the golf swing. To gain the golf swing, man must work. It's work without toil. For those of us who know and love it, golf is truly happiness.
Everything relates to the next, so we have to work in the proper order. So I want to talk about why we do certain things, and these whys are what allow you to achieve the perfect single plane address. Now the first thing is the tilt of the body. And notice when we talk about the address and grip, we're talking about the address position, the body's position first, before we actually put our hands on the club. But tilt of the body matters. And one of the things that we talked about earlier is how important tilt is to the most important moment of impact. So impact is created from the proper tilt of the body and the proper rotation so we can compress the golf ball correctly. So we want to tilt the body in an ideal fashion from the very beginning of the swing. In other words, we don't want to stand straight up and then try to figure out how to tilt. We need to preset our body's tilt position in an ideal fashion to help us simply achieve the most important moment of impact. And that's really the benefit of the single plane swing. So let's talk about how we put our body in position and then get our lead arm in position and why we do that. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier was range of motion. Range of motion is where the body has reached its range of motions. And notice, and you can do these simple little tests with your own body if you want to follow the instruction here, is you can see that if I stand straight up and let's talk about, you know, how the body's working here. But when I put my hand on the golf club, you're going to basically grip a golf club and the lead hand will have a relationship to the face. Because one of the most important aspects of hitting a golf ball is where the face is at the moment of impact. We all know that. We want a square face at impact. So how do we get the body to line up with the club face so we can get it square every single time at the moment of impact? Well, one of the things that you're going to find out is that this hand, the way you grip the club with the lead hand, has everything to do with where the club face is lined up. Now, having said that, it makes perfect sense that we want to make sure the back of the hand lines up to the club face at the moment of impact. But I want to show you what happens if I put my arm out here in front of my body where I'm standing straight up. Notice I can rotate my hand all the way to the ground. In other words, the back of the hand, I can rotate all the way to the ground like this. So my range of motion goes all the way down. Now the target is not the ground, the target is out here towards the golf course there. So notice that range of motion is affected by how I'm standing. Now if I tilt my body and I put my arm in front of me, you'll notice that it starts reducing the amount of range of motion. I can't quite go as far as I did before. Now watch this. If I stand here and I rotate my arm as far this way as I can, then I isolate. Okay, so I isolate the upper part of my arm, so I hold this still, and I only rotate the bottom part of my forearm. You'll notice that I can only go that far with my hand, and that's where the target is. That's the back of the hand to the target. So in other words, you saw how a different position of my arm, a full rotation this way, and then a full rotation this way, isolated the hand so it could only go into its full range of motion towards the target. All right, now that may have been pretty complicated. So here's what happens during the swing, and that's why this is so important. If I can position the tilt of my body correctly and rotate my body correctly, notice that the arm is in that rotation. It's in this rotation coming down, and then this gets isolated because of my tilt. I get isolated, and the only thing that can move is the forearm to square the club. So notice throughout that little demonstration, the position of my body The rotation of my body, the isolation of the shoulder allows the arm to only rotate into a square position at impact. Now, earlier I discussed this. I said basically the most important thing we can do is position our body correctly because it's going to isolate certain parts and reduce ranges of motion. So now you saw that, how did I actually get to a point where I couldn't make a mistake? In other words, a mistake-proof squaring of the club happened because of body tilt, arm rotation, shoulder position, and then arm rotation. All that occurred because of a tilt of my body. So tilt becomes a very primary factor to us achieving a square club face at impact. So let's do that with the lead arm. Let's put the lead hand on there, but we're going to tilt first. So I'm going to tilt my body. Now, the tilt is what that's doing is it's bringing this shoulder higher. Now I'm going to bring it forward. So now it's isolating the shoulder forward. I'm going to rotate it this way, and then without rotating the upper part of my arm, because I usually just hold it here to show you, just rotate the forearm, and then I grip the club. And now you can see that is the ideal rotation, both of the upper arm and the lower part of the arm, and the hand position forms that line we just talked about that Mo has from the face-on view. Now, so we now have the alignment. There's something else we need to talk about. Not only do I have my arm in its nice, my body in its tilt, in this nice isolated position, what I'm also doing is what we call ulnar deviation. Ulnar deviation is when the hand is fully extended. So this is, again, another full range position. You notice that I have a full range of motion of the wrist. Now, we've got to get into some detail here because now thumb position and hand position matter. Now, why am I doing this? Because when I get to impact, I want to have a full extension of the arm because that's how it gets to its full range of motion. If I grab the club incorrectly with the lead hand after I've tilted, I run the risk of having a lot of motion of the hand. We want this hand to be able to go to one place at impact. So here's the way I kind of recommend doing this. Once you get into your tilt and you have the club in your lead hand, take your thumb off of the club. So just take your thumb completely off, all right? And then I want you to go ahead and release the wrist down. So your thumb is not on the club. And then once your hand is released, notice all the pressure is here, set the thumb down. And now what you have is a full range of motion of the hand. So you're in an ulnar deviated position in its full range. And now your arm is in an extended position. So let's go through that really quickly. You have the tilt, you have the arm's range of motion, and then you have the hand's range of motion. And then that's my address with my lead arm. Okay. Now, quickly, I want to talk about something that I run into a lot when I teach people this is the way you're going to practice and train and learn it. So eventually, what I just showed you here is going to be natural to you. You'll never have to think about this. If you train it correctly, you'll walk up to a golf shot, set the club down, and you'll hit a golf ball. You're not going to think about all these 5 or 6 things I just taught you about the lead arm, tilt, lead hand, all that. You're not going to think about that anymore. You must learn it and train it and practice it, but eventually it needs to become like riding a bike or driving a car. You don't think about it anymore, you just do it. So again, I don't want you going to the golf course and thinking about 10 different things to hit a golf ball. That means you haven't learned it yet. When you finally learn this and get this perfectly memorized and as part of your habitual way you play golf, you just go do it, right? So again, we're in the training mode here and we're not in the playing mode. That's why I said this is a ball striking class, this is a learning class, this is a teaching class. This isn't a playing class, all right? That's a different element, different story. Okay, now we have the lead arm, lead hand in position. Now notice that my lead hand's in position. Look at the trail hand. And this is why we want the body in a tilt, because notice the trail hand when I bring it up to the club. You gotta get this alignment first and the proper tilt. This hand comes from underneath. Now I want you to look at the position of this hand. Notice it's not in a on top position, it's not way under, it's in a skipping the rock position. This hand is very much in a, how would you skip a rock? And notice, if I say skip a rock, you have your body is tilted, your arm is bent, you're coming down, and you're able to kind of move this hand in a non-rotational way. That's what skipping a rock is. So if I skip a rock, it would be tilt, non-rotation, straighten the arm, bend and straighten the arm. So we're basically doing that exact thing by placing the hand on the club. And I'll give you one more example here. Is notice when I grab this golf ball, Notice the lever being created here. So I have this lever with the hand, so I'm using this to skip the rock as well. So again, there's the pressure point on the hand, there's how I would skip a rock, there's the position I want this shoulder and this arm in. So now when I set up to the golf ball here, and I have my tilt and my lead arm in position, this trail hand, now look at it, it comes from underneath. Now, look what you're seeing. You're seeing that nice alignment of the lead arm and the club. You're seeing the trail hand from an underneath position. You're seeing the back of the hand to the target. The club is pointing up to my lead side. We're going to talk about the pivot point here as well. Now, notice the foot position. The lead foot is turned out. That's because at impact, we're going to want a slightly flexed lead knee. The trail foot is, I say like you walk, but it's turned out but slightly straight, so it's not as turned out as the lead foot. Again, that's a stabilization position of that foot. And so now we have this nice alignment of the club and the arm. Now this arm is visible above this arm. Now I can see when I turn down the line, notice how this arm is above that arm, and that's because of that tilt we talked about. And notice how the club now is lining up with the trail arm. There's that single plane alignment. So notice, I did all that to show you that we're basically isolating the body's ranges of motion. We're putting the hand and the arm in its full range of motion. We're isolating certain parts of it. We're putting the body in the proper tilt. We're putting this trail hand in a non-rotational position. And when we did all that, we created the two straight lines, this single plane line and this single plane line. And now you look at me and I'm exactly matching the model. And that's what I want you to be able to do, is exactly match the model.